Thank you for taking some time today. Um, so the first question is really talk to me about. I know you guys were planning. VASTUM was planning actually to come up to Seattle as part of a run, but when COVID went down, how did that impact you as a band, but then also maybe as an individual? You can go off in any way you want to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so Vastum we're supposed to do just like three shows up north, Portland, Seattle, Vancouver in mid-March, and everything hit the fan probably like that week or earlier that week, or maybe less than a week before we were supposed to go. So, um, for like that whole week before we were supposed to fly up to Portland, it was like, well, do we go? Do we not go? Should we cancel now? Should we? So we kind of held out as long as we could, and then it was like, I don't know. I think it might have been even longer than a week before we were supposed to go that we were thinking of canceling, and then the promoters just had to cancel. I think at that point it was like Oregon and Washington had that like no crowd rule of like
Right.
250 people, and we're like, well, at that
Can we
point,
all stand 6 feet apart? How are we going to make this work? Do we wear inner tubes at the show? What's going on? Yeah.
yeah, and anyone that's ever been to a Vastum show knows that social distancing and Vastum don't really.
Well, I'm trying to picture out I'm trying to picture how's Danny going to do this? Because I can just see him coming into the crowd and wait, I can't do that at this show.
Start crowding and
Exactly. Kind of a Moses parting the Red Seas moment. Um, has it I know for a lot of bands, and one of the reasons why I'm doing that, a lot of bands printed up a boatload of merch, etc., before shows. I'm sure that's the way with you guys. Is there a place that folks can go to, because this is a tough time, is there a place that folks can go to, to help support and make sure that you as musicians get through, and we're trying to help as many as we can?
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thanks. So unfortunately, the merch that we were going to sell up north is sitting in a box somewhere in Portland, and it's just going to stay there, I think,
Right.
maybe until we get to reschedule. I don't know. We might have to revisit that at some point. But and unfortunately, our store envy shop is temporarily closed.
Okay.
Because our drummer Chad Gailey was pretty much managing that store, and he's down in San Jose. It's about an hour from Oakland, and I'm not sure if he just can't get to the stuff, so he hasn't been able to do it. So that's why it's closed now. But yeah, so sadly, we don't have any merch for sale at the moment. But people can go to, I think Bandcamp's really the best way to support us, or any of my other projects. You can opt to pay more if you want. I just put out a new solo single that you could just pay what you want. It's free, or you can pay something if you want.
Let's talk about that for a little bit. How recent is this piece that you put out?
Oh, well, it was sort of an off-the-cuff remix track from one of the Diminution tracks.
Oh, yes.
It was like, so total spur of the moment thing. Bandcamp was doing like 124
That Friday or something, yeah.
They were waiving all their commission fees and giving it to, letting the artists collect 100% of their sales. And I was like, well, why not? I've been sitting on this remix thing. I was going to use it for a compilation, and then I thought, well, why don't I just put it out? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows when the next compilation thing will come around, and who knows where labels are at these days. And yeah,
absolutely. That's great. So that's I'll make sure to put that as a tag in the bottom of the video. That's fantastic. Talking about your solo work, one of the things I think I've noticed a lot of people are picking up on, and I'm going to use an old term that's kind of late 70s noise pollution, which I still love as a term, but we're living through the strange pause in many things right now. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I've noticed and I'm bringing this up because some of the found sound material that has worked its way into your musical work. I'm finding that when I go outside, with the decrease in human-made noise, I'm noticing things at a different level now. The frogs there's a pond probably 200 yards from my house. I went out and recorded them yesterday just because I had never been able to hear just the frogs that loud in a really long time. So I'm just wondering, as somebody who borrows from I'll loosely call it the natural world and the kind of ambient soundscapes that are around us all the time, how are you kind of tuning into this strange ambient just shift that we've got going on now? And I'll just open up, just go if you want to.
That's really interesting. Unfortunately, I live in downtown Oakland where there's really not much natural sound happening. I'll hear like seagulls every now and then.
Yeah.
We live pretty close to Lake Merritt, so there's some cool birds around there sometimes. Actually, the found natural sound thing there's been such a shortage of it for me, and it's really kind of been wearing on me. I have access to, I don't have a car. They're not rental places that are that close by, so I haven't been able to just go to remote places and record stuff, like I love to do. And so that's been kind of like, I've been kind of hungry for that, but I guess I just have to work harder and be more creative.
No, you don't have to. I'll send you lossless frog files of hours of just droning frogs in a pond, and you don't have to.
Yeah, the last 2 summers, I have had quite a few frog recordings. My parents live in New Jersey. That's where I grew up, actually. And they've been renting a beach house down by the Jersey Shore, and in the summer, the sound of the frogs and the crickets and whatever insects are just mind-blowingly, like, just orchestral and
Yes, and so rich, and the amount of percussive elements that are going on, it's incredible.
Yeah, so like East Coast summers, I'm sure you remember those pretty well.
Yeah.
Are just magical when it comes to like the night insect sound and soundscape, and the humidity and the smells, and they're not that many fireflies. So.
Yeah, well, yes, I recall fireflies a lot from Maine where we lived, and then also when we lived in Wisconsin, there was a lot there for a while, and you would get this visual that a field of fireflies is visually mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So we're all finding ourselves trying to make sure that we hold on to our sanity as we're in the midst of this very difficult situation. Are there particular activities or maybe movies or books that or even topics that you have found yourself kind of gravitating towards as a way to manage this insane time?
Yeah, well, it's funny, over over Easter weekend, my partner Nathan and I watched Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I had seen that movie once before, like maybe 20 years ago, and I gotta say it's really held up over time. It's kind of different for a Scorsese film. It's got a little bit of his touch, his, kind of New York humor in there a little bit. But yeah, Willem Dafoe and.
Yeah, I know. That's one of his best performances ever. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. So super intense and violent. And I've been kind of gravitating towards that, which isn't really my norm. Like I finally got around to watching Game of Thrones, which I know I'm like 10 years late to the whole ordeal, but
Right.
that's been really satisfying.
Yeah.
Just it makes you feel something, like, I don't know, the intensity and, humans in these really dire situations. And
There's the one scene, I'm gonna forget the characters, just my graybeard mind forgets things from time to time. But the scene where the individual skull is crushed, and the visceral reaction and the Velcro-like stickiness with which that, I mean, it was palpably one of the most intense scenes I have seen in a very long time.
yeah,
And you're right, it had this ability to just be so intense, but not kind of, it's a good show. It's cool that you're getting to it kind of after the hype. I did that with Lost, right? I was not somebody who watched Lost when it was out and big, and I watched it later, and it kind of allowed me to make sense of it in my own way without. So I think it's actually a good way to watch sometimes is years later.
yeah. And something, when series are really long like that, and they're like 8 seasons of something, it's like I haven't had time to sit down and watch stuff, like binge watch the whole thing until now, pretty much. So, which I guess is good and bad, because I haven't really been working on as much music as I had been. And that's just, except for the electronic projects, which I can still do from home really easily. That's the way I've been doing it for a long time. But yeah, the metal stuff, and I also have another new band that just got off the ground. And
Tell us a little bit about that if you'd like to. I'd be interested to hear about that. That would be great.
Yeah, I feel bad because I don't have anything to show for it right now. But Terabellum is a new band with Joe Hutton from Hammers of Misfortune, and Sam Foster. We were in a band called Saros many years ago. Fantastic drummer. And then my partner, Nate Verrill, who's in Cardinal Worm, and we do a project called Fear 2 together. So yeah, we're the 4 of us are Terabellum, and it's sort of a kind of a post-punk, ethereal, death rock kind of thing. Yeah,
I'd love to hear your take on that style of music. That's one of the things that I've always completely dug about, let's say, VASTUM, right? Was the ability to bring in an experimental element, the beginning of songs that have, ambient noises that, or chant, the range of vocal styles that you as an individual are capable of. When I heard, like I said, when I heard Cold and Cloud, and a lot of the solo work, to me, and there's an element almost of This Mortal Coil, with the use of your voice as both a lyrical mechanism, but also just a purely instrumental mechanism from time to time. And so, like I said, for years, I was like, oh my God, this is the new Liz Fraser. What is going on? This is incredible stuff. And then I heard VASTUM and I'm like, oh my God, and so talk about, I mean, just from a practice and technique standpoint, I'm blown away by your ability to hit all of that stuff. So, I mean, how much time have you had to dedicate over the years to working on having that diverse a vocal style?
Well, funny enough, I haven't been doing vocals as long as I've been playing guitar. And for the longest time, I was kind of afraid of singing. And it was only probably when I formed Saros in 2003 that I started to come out of my shell doing vocals. So there's sort of like the metal path that I took for 20 years now, and then but going back to like the death rock stuff and the ambient stuff, industrial, or the weirder kind of atmospheric stuff, I was in all that stuff first,
Yeah.
like, from the age of 14, I was listening to like Throbbing Gristle and
Absolutely.
and Cocteau Twins and um, all that stuff.
Yes.
And seeing many of those bands live at the time, which was pretty amazing. And so all that stuff is really like in my DNA. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
and then the metal, and then I love metal too. I was listening to like lots of earache stuff. Godflesh was kind of like my gateway into a lot of the more underground metal stuff.
Street Cleaner. I've been actually going back and listening to Street Cleaner recently, and it really, I mean, that album was so eye-opening for me as at the time a musician, but also mainly as a consumer of music. So that's interesting to hear that slips into a lot of people, and it kind of slips under the radar a little bit. But god damn, that was such a powerful album when it came out.
Totally. And like I would say even with Vastum, like Dan and I are the vocalists, lyricists. He definitely comes from a lot of that sensibility as well. Like, he surprised me one day. I went to a Diamond de Galas concert, and there he was. I was like, oh, I didn't know you were into her. Like,
right.
So I think we kind of share some of those, weirder, darker tendencies, atmospheric, kind of death rocky influences. So
yeah. The material partly as a function of that becomes much more enveloping than just the song kind of minus the additional ambient elements, and then also the layering of voices is sometimes, to me as a listener, are these different parts of the same ego talking to themselves about the topic that's in line. There's a lot of different ways, and I know that psychoanalysis actually is something that at least I read. You can read anything on the computer, but that has been an influence to some degree on your approach to lyrics, and I wonder if that's I'm wondering how much that was actually the case, or if it was, how much does that creep into your work?
Well, for Vastum, it absolutely does. Dan's a psychoanalytic psychotherapist, so he's getting his PhD in an interdisciplinary, I don't know, it's kind of like history and psychoanalysis, philosophy. I'm not even sure what all the things are.
He's going to be the next Michel Foucault.
Anthropology, yeah, exactly. That
kind
of thing. And so, so he's, and then I work, I'm the one of two office admin at the Psychoanalytic Institute of Northern California. So I have access to all kinds of stuff to read on it. And I would say his lyrics are a little more along the psychoanalytic thread than mine are. A little more on the intellectual side, not completely, but so yeah, I would say with that stuff it does more. I think with my other work, especially my solo work, and then my electronic trio Ionophore, I do all the vocals for that as well, is way more stream of consciousness. And some of the stuff that some of the lyrics I write and record, I don't even know what they're going to be till I hit record, and the background music's going, and I just hit go and throw paint and see what happens, and then I shape it from there. That's what I like to do. It feels really free and spontaneous, and
there's an improvisational element to that's wonderful.
And then live, like right before all the Corona stuff hit the fan, Vastum flew out to Maryland to play Shadow Frost Fest, and then I did a solo set with Nate and Ryan, who the three of us play. We play live. My solo material. So that is really improvisational, like just make up lyrics on stage on
Wow.
the spot. I'm it's sort of addictive. It's like once I started doing it that way and I got more comfortable doing it, that's the only way I like to do it now. I mean, there's some written elements of it too, but I try to keep at least half of the set improv.
Oh, do you have themes, or is it literally just like you said, stream of consciousness, and you ride it? So is there kind of a subtext there going on, or is it just like scat singing in some ways?
Some of it's kind of spiritual, not in the religious sense, but
Yeah.
sort of in the occult magic sense of it. So and then the stuff that I write definitely has different themes. Insomnia, Cold and Cloud. Cold and Cloud is more personal. That was my first album.
Right. Yeah.
Which is super cool that because out of my 3 albums, that was the one that was sort of like the least people know about. More people know about Diminution.
Right.
Insomnia. That's super awesome.
It's this old hippie guy in Central Maine had it for this college radio station, and he would play it, and I would just be like, I may have been the only one who was listening to it. It was like 2 a.m, and it was like, God damn, this is good, So it is funny that that's the one that kind of made it all the way to Central Maine.
Totally, and that's a pretty personal album. Although the found sounds on that album were from my parents' backyard in New Jersey.
Wow.
So there are crickets and I don't know, all kinds of night bugs on.
Yeah.
I think June 14 is the song that
Right.
has. So so I still perform material from that.
Mm-hmm.
And basically that album's just about being so emotionally devastated that you can just barely function. It was just written in almost a complete state of despair. So from there, I kind of, got a little less self-indulgent,
Right.
moved on
Right.
to, like Diminution is more thematically, on the macro level.
And I'd like you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I know that in some ways Diminution in it is about, in some ways, struggling to find your place in today's world. And in particular, I think the role of the artist in the world that we live in. So if you could talk about that, I'd be honored to kind of hear your take on that. And then maybe also how even this extreme situation that we're in now feeds back onto that question as well.
It's so funny. I feel like I write about stuff too early. Like, that album would have had a totally different meaning if it came out now than it did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And really at the time, it was like the sense of, creative deterioration and giving way to, the, I don't know, like mass-produced ways of consuming art, sort of like the consumer platforms have taken over and are more valued than the creative process. And so that's really what that was getting into. And there were some, personal flourishes as well. The personal experience of watching a family member die. So that's life leaving. So that's, the art was very inspired by that experience as well. Absolutely. And but we're like, I feel like sometimes I write lyrics about things that, or my bandmates do, and or write song titles that for things that kind of like happen later. Like
right
before, we had a song on our first album. Now we're going back like 8 years when we wrote that album, called Coronaviride.
Oh no.
Go figure.
Perhaps we found patient zero in that song.
Oh, right. So I guess it's sort of this unconscious. I almost like it's like, well, I didn't know that was going to happen. I didn't know this was going to happen 8 years later, but at the same time, it's like, well, maybe sort of unconsciously I did.
Well, I think in some ways or at a subconscious level, we're dealing with, well, at least a lot of psychoanalysts would say we're dealing with that issue of death constantly. And so it's always there. Last question that I have for you, and that is moonshine right there, folks. That is straight moonshine. No.
Myself.
What's the one thing, and it can be an indulgence or it could be something grandiose, but what's the one thing that you're really looking forward to at the other side of this shared experience that we're all going through right now?
Yeah, well, I think I'm worried that it'll never go back to normal, not for a really long time. So things will reopen, but not in the same way. So the things that I am looking forward to mostly, which is performing live, funny, and being in the same room with my bandmates and pick up the guitar again, and singing to a mic again. I don't know if that's going to happen once things are back open. Like this weird, everybody's standing like.
Well, do you remember those old inflatable sumo suits? Right. So you can just I can picture just, and even then we're probably still too close if we all wore those.
Right. Like how are shows going to be? So it's like things are going to open back up, like maybe restaurants, and schools, and offices and stuff like that. But are they going to really be able to put on like a show with like 300 to 500 people?
And the scary, not scary, well, yeah, scary thing. The scary thing is that some places are going to start opening up real soon in parts of this country, and I think we're going to learn a lot, unfortunately, by trial and error with human lives.
Yeah.
And that.
That's
God,
true.
I was trying to end on a positive note.
Yeah, another thing I'm looking forward to is seeing my family who are all on the East Coast, and being able to fly cross country again, which hopefully I get to do by the holidays, but probably.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, on a personal note, my folks are back out east too, and they're in Massachusetts, and it's starting to really spike there, and I'm. It's
My sister's in Massachusetts, actually, in Western Mass, and she's a social worker and can't work from home. She works in a nursing home.
Yeah. Oh.
Someone there has coronavirus, and probably keep in touch with her and make sure she's all right.
Absolutely. Well, I wish her the best. I wished you and your partner and all of the kind of community and network of musicians that you're connected with the best. I want you to be safe. I want to thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for all your awesome photo work too. I wanted to publicly thank you for that. And, we need to hook you up with a record because
it's.
Thanks so much. And,
well,
yeah, you and your family. Hope you guys stay safe.
We'll bang heads again. We'll see each other again.
Awesome.
I may look like Gandalf at that point, but we'll see each other again. All right. Awesome. Have a good day.
All right. You too.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.